So I listened to Homebrewed Christianity. It kind of went through the whole deconstruction thing. I was trying to find. So I've been listening to Trip for a few years, and so me and Trip have just interacted, as just casual social media mutuals, and eventually, like over time, me and him have posted stuff about Tolkien and commented on each other's stuff or DM'd each other, and especially when they announced the show, like I would post something and then Trip would be like, "Yo, what do you think?" And then he would post something and I'd be like, "Dude, this trailer is sick." And so over time, it started becoming more and more apparent that stuff was releasing. And Trip put out a tweet and said, "Hey, should I do a class?" Something like that. Who would want to be down with it? And so I hang out in Tolkien scholar circles, and so I meet weekly with some people. And I reached out to him, and I was like, "If you're for real, I hang out with some Tolkien scholars." And then he sent me a whole outline for the class, and I went and reached out to some scholars and said, "What do you think?" And got my responses. And then this class came together.
I mean, just the fact that you hang out with Tolkien scholars is amazing to me, because I only hang out with musicians, or musicians that think they're musicians, that are on that learning curve. And, it's, I'm trying to branch out. And so the opportunity, Trips give me some couple of cool opportunities. This is the opportunity that I just couldn't say no to talk to Tolkien nerds about Tolkien is just beautiful. I mean, if this was Frank Herbert, I'd be going for days.
Oh, dude.
I wouldn't have.
Don't get started on Dune, my man. Let's go.
No, I'll start my own Dune podcast. Maybe I'm a freak for Dune.
A freak for Dune.
Cue the Jesus Freak song for Dune.
There's too much sand. Too much sand. Nobody
wears sandals either.
Yeah. All right. It is now live in the group as well. So we can get going. So there's another guy that might show up. I never know when Jason shows up or not. He's currently talking to Will Willimon, who used to be in charge of the United Methodist Church, and he says we'll see what happens. But he also has cancer and lets me make jokes about it. So if I make a cancer joke at him, I'm not being mean, just so you know.
Okay.
He's had it for a long time, and I'm just like, you can't really keep playing the sympathy card all these years. See, wow. That sounds inappropriate, except that I try to come up with an awkward joke every time. So just don't, you don't need to judge me, Kevin, because middle school me, who like wanted to grow up like and be Kevin Max, would be sad if you judged me. I'd start crying.
As they say in Hogan's Heroes, I know nothing.
I don't want to be a Boromir in your eyes. I'd rather be a Faramir. All right.
I live out Boromir's day. My life is a cycle of Boromir. Boromir's tears and Boromir's journey. This is me. I even look like Boromir. So kind of. I don't know.
Kind of. But you don't have a big horn with you, do you?
I don't have the horn. I do have the axe, as I told you.
We do an axe reveal in a little bit. I feel like there's a whole moment. I'll even use my air horn when you pull your axe out.
I don't have the horn of Gondor. I would drink out of the horn of Gondor if I had it.
I mean, especially if you're Boromir, you're the captain of Osgiliath. You need that horn. You need it.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to hit record then. Here we go. Oops. Oh, yeah. You hear that air horn. You know what time it is? It's time for some Tolkien Heads. And that's right. This is the first gathering post Rings of Power, first 2 episodes. And the first gathering with the one and only Kevin Max joining us. How are you doing tonight, Kevin?
I am doing absolutely wonderful. I have got my horn of Boromir's flask over here drinking some top shelf red wine from Costco.
Oh, yeah.
We're excited, man. I'm excited to talk to you about anything and everything Tolkien. But as I was telling Nick, I mean, if we could, kind of segue over into Dune at any moment, I'd be happy
Ooh.
about that too. But
because you're not a fantasy monotheist. You're like a
No.
you're like a polyfantasyist.
I'm a polyfantasyist.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you hear the fantasy that evokes deep questions of humanity, that requires the kind of fiction that allows you to be honest in ways that normal conversation don't facilitate, Kevin's like, I don't want one fantasy to play with.
No,
I'm a connoisseur of the fantasy.
give me Thomas Covenant, the Unbeliever series too. Stephen R. Donaldson. Give me Anne Rice. We can just talk for days in the fantasy realm, man. But anyways, this is about Tolkien. It's about your head.
Ooh.
Head. Tolkien's heads.
You were talking about Dune. Did you know that unfortunately Tolkien got a copy of Dune and did not like it? Did you know that?
Shame on Tolkien.
I know. It's not lame.
He also didn't like himself. I mean, if you think of he edited himself till the day he died. Some of the people on Twitter that were upset about different parts of the show, I was like, yeah, but that actually was his opinion for 9 months. It's just sometimes if you spend your whole life editing and things, you're like, no, you hit your sweet spot earlier.
Yeah.
And
there could have been some competition there, some petty jealousy. I mean, there is among writers, right? I mean, I know that we suffer from that as musicians. So I could only imagine, there's a form of narcissism there, that Tolkien was obviously probably privy to and prey to many times, his own narcissism. And you read something as spectacularly perfect as Dune, it's like, man, should I have written, The Hobbit a little differently? I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, Tolkien, after Lord of the Rings, puts out the new edition of The Hobbit.
Yeah.
With the actual real version of how he got the ring from Gollum. And so the first version is just a story told the dwarves, where it was a friendly exchange after beating him in the riddle contest.
Yes.
Which you could say that was like retconning, or he was deeply committed to let the reader in.
He was still editing himself. Constant editing.
Well, okay. So
contextualizing. Yeah.
So before we jump in and give start talking a little bit about the new show and then get into Tolkien, and also, by the way, we're going to play a brand new track that just came out that Kevin did, which is, I'm sure all of you have seen the Hobbit cartoon 500 or 600 times. I think I showed my VHS tapes earlier during this class, but Kevin has a new album called Fantasies, and it's the greatest adventure from The Hobbit. So we're going to play that later too. But before we get in, Kevin, you may not even know this, but the world is currently wrestling with the most challenging 3 questions Tolkien heads have to answer. It's kind of like marry, kill, and screw, but for Tolkien heads. So we need to know who.
I mean, it'd be really easy for a Game of Thrones person, but for Tolkien, it's a little more difficult.
I know, but they're variations. So because it is not Game of Thrones. So who do you want to go drink a lot with at the Prancing Pony? And because of our previous conversation, this would be a night where you end up singing karaoke and talk to Irish elves. Like that much fun at the Prancing Pony. Karaoke, Irish elves. Which character are you going to Prancing Pony with? Then you're at Helm's Deep, Battle of Helm's Deep. Who are you counting orc takedowns with? Who's your sidekick at Helm's Deep? Third, should you be tasked to go to Mordor? Who's journeying with you? You can't pick Sam. Sam's cheat code. Sam is cheat code because everyone knows you would pick Sam, and if you didn't pick Sam and he was an option, you'd get judged, fail the quiz, all over it. So, Prancing Pony, Pound Town Buddy, the go Helm's Deep sidekick go to Mordor with? Those are the 3 questions. Pick any 3 characters you want.
First of all, Sam's too much of a Karen. I'd never take him.
Oh.
Okay, so going to Prancing Pony, I'd probably pick Radagast the Brown so he could drop some mushrooms in my drink. And we could go from there. I mean, I just feel like when you're with a wizard, anything can happen, right? Like, and bringing a wizard to a drinking establishment has just got to be all sorts of fun. I mean, that might have been the reason that Gandalf never really showed up to the Prancing Pony. He might have been kicked out, and so as somebody that's been kicked out of establishments before, I mean, I think it would be a fun time with Radagast. Helm's Deep. Wow, that's a good question. One of those blue wizards, maybe.
Because they aren't already occupied in the story, so you can call them out.
I mean,
yeah, and do you want Alatar or do you want Palando? Which one?
I'd say Alatar for sure.
Oh, good choice. That's the correct choice.
But if I was going, I mean, just for people that can reference this and immediately, probably Beorn.
Ooh.
But then again, you'd have to watch your own back with Beorn. I think berserkers are cool. They just take out everybody. So you just kind of find a nice little rock to stand behind and watch Beorn go crazy. What's the last question?
Journey to Mordor.
Oh, that's easy. Bombadil, because he doesn't talk so. It's not somebody incessantly chatting in your ear about whatever, like Sam. You know what I mean? You've got Bombadil, who rarely talks, and if
he does, he sings.
And he sings, and he just knows everything. So you could ask him, like, why are we even doing this? Can't you just take the ring and eat it or destroy it or whatever you do? And maybe make friends with Melkor, and it's, you don't even have to go to the bridge or the tower of Badak-Dur. What's the name of the
Barad-dûr?
You got Barad-dûr. You got it.
Yeah.
Barad-dûr. You don't have to go there if you're with Tom Bombadil. He can just lay waste to any of those things. And
imagine songwriting with Tom. I mean, his songs literally have some of the most powerful, stuff in Middle Earth. And if you're writing songs with him, I think you could sway Melkor and Sauron, and then you could all go to the Prancing Pony and do shrooms with Radagast.
Absolutely. There shouldn't be good or evil. We should all be able to go to the Prancing Pony together as universalists, But I think Tom Bombadil is, he is he's the equalizer, right? I
mean, he can hold the ring without even a temptation. And we have had an ongoing discussion with all the Tolkien scholars that have joined about Tom Bombadil, because Jason, who's not here yet, was like, what's the deal with Tom Bombadil? Which really hurt my feelings. I was like, what do you mean, what's the deal with Tom Bombadil? I mean, Tom Bombadil is like the Middle Earth freestyle rapper who's like always ready to Tom Bombadilio. He's got connections with nature. I mean, he's married a river fairy, and he's the oldest thing in Middle Earth. And if you just go to his house, you sleep real good and have cool dreams. I mean, what kind of meals do you have to be serving to have the kind of quality dreams you have if you visit Tom Bombadil? He may be friends with Radagast.
I think Tom Bombadil is Eru.
Ooh.
I've heard that
you were
going to
say he was the stranger. And
the stranger is some multiversal grifter who's found portals. And he's literally just teaching people how to smoke weed properly. He's got he teaches the hobbits about the long bottom leaf. And, I mean, look at him. He's obviously a prog rocker from the early 70s. Probably somebody that got kicked out of Yes, But
And he looks like an extra from Almost Famous. That's what I was thinking.
Absolutely.
Oh man. Okay, so one of the before we dig past this, I had a couple people bring up that we made an aside comment in the previous podcast about your audition for the Lord of the Rings movies. So I think you should tell the story a bit, and then we'll dig into the show. But I've already gotten a text from someone going, "You please don't forget, Trip. I can already tell that you're
not going to ask
imbibing."
me. Yeah. Oh wow. Yeah, because it's super embarrassing, and that's why I don't bring it up a lot. But I did audition. I was asked to audition, and I had an agent at CAA in Los Angeles that told me about it. I flew over to London. I was in some, kind of church in the middle of town, and they asked me to speak the line where he's on Mount Doom, and it's the dialogue about the ring. He's seeing the ring in his
Frodo's line.
Frodo's line, and it's the first time that I saw the script, and they ask you to just kind of like read it on the spot. And I probably did some really weird, I tried to be James Dean in the moment, or whoever I was thinking of. I was, Stanislavski method of acting. I was thinking, okay, and it probably ended up like James Spader trying to be, Frodo, and it just didn't work. And I felt it as I was doing the audition. I felt the failure. But I felt, okay, maybe they'll like my look. Maybe they know, that I can sing. And I walked away just thinking, why did you do this? Why are you here? But the experience was just amazing. And I tell everybody, I'm like, yes, I auditioned for Lord of the Rings, and I was rejected for very good reasons. Elijah Wood couldn't have found a better person. Again, had they been looking for Boromir, I might have had a chance.
Well, one of the current the live viewers suggests casting you as Tom Bombadil. So if Amazon was to holler at you, Kevin, and be like, we need someone who can sing all of Tom Bombadil's songs and have some fun, are you open to being the Bombadilio of Amazon?
Absolutely. As long as I don't have to rap, absolutely.
Yeah, you've already done your rap face. Is that what you're saying?
I've already done my penance and rap.
Yeah.
It's as a singer, absolutely. I feel like I could embody the absolute ideal of Tom Bombadil. Now, Tom, he had a red face, and what was he had the weird nose, and that could be prosthetics, right? Or that could be me.
Well, I don't know, Nick. What do you think? I mean,
if we put some, some beard extensions, got you a little gray beard going down, got you a blue coat with a blue hat with a feather and some yellow boots, you could be. I think so.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
we need to get you in touch with Bear McCreary ASAP.
Make me look like a garden gnome, and I'm there. Honestly, like I would, if I could play Tom Bombadil in Rings of Power, I could literally like retire after that and just disappear off the face of the planet and just go into complete seclusion and be happy. Although I have my family.
Literally become Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, never say anything to anybody ever, and don't care about the state of the world and whose side everybody's on.
Well, as someone that
take the ring, I could take the ring. I could eat the ring. I could, I could turn the ring into, something more pleasant, like a unicorn. You know,
Ooh.
I mean, who needs a ring? Who needs rings of power?
What
You
about
know?
a unicorn of love? That's what happened when when Tom Bombadil passes the ring of power, it becomes a unicorn of love.
I love it.
It's in History of Middle Earth, volume 29.
It's in there. It's in the footnotes. It's there.
It's in the footnotes. So, all right. So now, everyone that's on here, if you haven't watched the first 2 episodes of Rings of Power, and you're planning to, and don't want to hear anything we say about it, here's your heads up. But now, Nick and I have had our ongoing text exchange about this, and I said, mostly because this was suggested by 2 different members. They were like, Nick's been doing lore dumps in your previous episodes, telling you things super nerds know that read everything. Like one time, Kevin, he was just like, someone asked a question, he goes, well, in letter 114, and I was like, I'm glad we're friends.
The fact that you called it a lore dump is intriguing to me. That Nick takes all sorts of lore dumps all the time, and he's
It's every day.
You know, keep your lore dump to like 1 or 2 lore dumps a day.
Yeah,
I'm pretty regular with the lore dumps. So,
look, okay, what was the other option I had? There was I did not know that when I said going to Pound Town, also had another meaning in other communities. That came up in a previous conversation with Chris, who is a very noted Tolkien queer scholar, who did not know what the first question I asked you about going to Pound Town with the Prancing Pony meant. So it's led to confusion. So maybe lore dump is also a form of confusion. So this is a lore score. That's what it was. Lore. All right. So Nick, I'm gonna throw your head up at the front as someone that has spent way more time hanging out with Tolkien nerds and stuff. I want to hear the super nerd response to things and fill in whatever gaps you think people need to know so that we could then end up having fun. But like just looking at our text messages and then dodging follow-ups so that you could share it at once. This is your lore score, which is unrelated to a dump. For Rings of Power.
I like the score too, because we started off with the Aina Lindale. We started off with music, the score, the music of the Ainur. So, it just, the whole world of Middle Earth is comprised of music. So I like that. So the lore score here. So I've met a lot of people who have either just read I think a majority of people have either read The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and then watched the movies, or have just watched the movies, The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit movies. And I think I've talked to a lot of people who said, I like the show, I'm just kind of lost. I don't know like what's happening. Like is this after The Hobbit? Is it before The Hobbit? Is it in between The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings? What's happening? And so for all those, this is all before The Hobbit. This is like thousands of years before The Hobbit. There's 3 ages. There's the first age, which is thousands of years ago. There's the second age, which is where the Amazon series is taking place, and the third age, is where The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings takes place. And so we are thousands of years in the second age. And so we start off in Valinor. And so that is the Undying Lands, the holy place. And Kevin has an axe because he is an OG warrior.
I'm just listening. The dialogue made me pull this out because I was ready for the next stage. You've got my axe,
and you have my bow. Ooh, so we Valinor. So we start off with Galadriel. If you've seen the show, she's a little baby. She's hanging out with her older brother Finrod, who is a key character in the show. So that's her brother. And that's in the first age. So we're at the beginning. You see the 2 trees. That's actually even before the first age. The first age doesn't happen until the first rising of the sun. So the sun hasn't even happened. We basically fast forward to after Morgoth is defeated. At this point in the second age, Sauron kind of gets his ass kicked multiple times. And so we're in a series where we are post Sauron ass kicking. And he is kind of coming back. So in the show, Galadriel wants to keep searching for Sauron because she finds the symbol that Sauron left on her brother after Sauron killed him. And Gil-galad says, no, where everything's peaceful, you can go to Valinor. So I'm going to stop there because there's just a lot. And this part actually is not really part of Tolkien's Legendarium. The like, what's the word? Campaign of peace that Gil-galad is kind of forcing on the Elvish realms. And elves kind of choose when they want to go to Valinor. It's not really a reward instilled by Elvish leaders.
I wouldn't think it's a reward. I mean, just watching Galadriel and her, reaction to it, I was right there with her. I'd be jumping off that boat and swimming to the nearest little rocky cliff. It's scary, all it was shining lights and birds. I mean, how fun could that be?
Yeah, it's true.
No, am I correct that in obviously the way Amazon purchased the rights to the Lord of the Rings, which this is based on the appendices and some of the stuff from the first chapter about the hobbits and all that kind of thing. But if you took all of Tolkien, her family has been reincarnated, and she would have seen them if she'd gone through, right?
No,
Gil-galad was reincarnated, right? And he's still in Valinor?
No. So
Finrod.
No, so Finrod would not be in Valinor. So Valinor's kind of like a paradise, but there's like a heavenly realm that's like a waiting period. It's kind of like Sheol. It's like a waiting place.
Okay, so she would have gone to the prep zone.
Yes.
And Finrod is in...
He's in Mandos, the halls of Mandos.
Elf purgatory.
Exactly.
I mean, it'd be fun.
Yeah, it would be a party.
Lots of singing.
No, it wouldn't. It's very sad in Mandos, in the halls of Mandos. So she wouldn't see. But she would feel. So there's a sense of immortality, purity. That is the reason why Middle Earth is dying is because the Undying Lands are not actively a part of Middle Earth. Even in the Second Age, it's kind of separated. It's still on Earth, but the Valar and Valinor and the elves there don't really interact with people. So they're only accepting elves at certain periods of time. And so Galadriel, this was consistent. So one of the things about the show is I was pleasantly surprised that there's some things that maybe not completely one-to-one with the lore, but we don't have details. But they're very consistent. So Galadriel, throughout her entire lifetime, does not want to go back to Valinor. She wanted to leave and rule in Middle Earth because she just thought it was so amazing and wonderful. And she wanted to kind of rule on her own. And it's not until she gets a ring of power herself where she actually wants to go back to Valinor. But she's not allowed because she kind of left with her uncle Feanor and all those other dudes when they did the kinslaying and they left to Middle Earth. And so basically when in the movies, when Galadriel rejects the ring, even though she'd be like a queen of beauty and power, that's when she basically passed the test and she's able to leave to go back to Valinor with Gandalf and Elrond and Frodo and Bilbo.
In the kinslaying, is that what's being referenced when you get in the prologue all of the elves pulling out their swords in a circle?
I think that's so the Oath of Feanor, which I think that's when all the brothers, all the sons of Feanor make an oath to basically kill anyone who gets in their way of getting the Silmarils. And so when they go to the Teleri, ooh, is that a Zelda sword? Is that the sword of
the sword? I'm pulling my sword as, you know, a possible elf lord, but Zelda rules. Okay, sorry.
Do you have a link? Do you have a link mini to go with that sword?
I have a link mini. It's got a rock around it with the actual symbol of Zelda. Breath of the Wild is my favorite game beyond Elden Ring. So yeah. But anyways, I was trying to be funny, but obviously
No, this is a nerdy session. Bring up the sword.
Yeah.
I
Your
like
sword
it
was distracting, Nick.
I'm bringing up counter lore, which is not good. I'm counter loring.
I have done some deep dives into the Zelda universe. So
with your lore dump. I'm wanting more.
He wants more lore dump. Come on, dump on Kevin, Nick.
Only if we establish a safe word.
Zelda.
Zelda is the safe word.
Link.
So, yeah. So we've got all that stuff in the prologue. It comes from everything that we talked about from like, not everything, but a lot of the stuff we talked about in our first lore dumps / lore scores, connect with Galadriel's story. And so, I'm trying to think of the other stuff that's part of the show. Well, we've got Gil-galad, you know, that's legit. Elrond, we haven't even talked about Elrond. And so part of what this show is doing is they're trying to get lots of characters so the timeline is compressed. And so all the things that happen, even in the appendices of the Lord of the Rings, happens over thousands of years. And so we can't hang out with characters that long. Or when people die and elves stay alive, every episode of a new person would die and we'd have to get new characters. So that doesn't make sense. And so that's why we kind of have the Harfoots at the same time, which were around during the First Age. Hobbits have been around since the beginning. They just weren't documented until the Third Age. And so, you know, we wouldn't be hearing about the Hobbits. We wouldn't know about what's going on at Numenor at this time, and even all the dynamics that's happening between the elves and the dwarves, Elrond and Durin's friendship, that sort of thing.
In one of the things that that I really liked about it, at least especially about the prologue, is knowing they don't have rights to the Silmarillion. They set up the cosmological structure to be very similar, even though they didn't have all the rights to the details, right? So you didn't have a giant spider taking down the two trees,
right?
Which, you know, is Shelob's mommy or whatever. But you did have the kind of ongoing series of destruction of light until it gets to the sun and the moon. You get the tension between elves of whether or not they actually stood before the light or not. Like if you mentioned this, and Stephen Yandel in his lecture talked about this, how there's different the big divisions of what kind of elf you are is how much access you had to the light, and you get like the kind of the gray elf, like what's the guy, the new character who's
Arondir? Yeah,
Arondir, who's got the green man chest plate, who got jerked back at the end of episode 2 by some sneaky orcs. And he has a different relationship with it. And then you see Galadriel talking to other elves being like, no, I know what this, I think of home more than you. I've had the light shine on me, right? Like she's basically like, I'm super old. I know all this. You don't have to tell me about who we are and where we come from. And so those kind of divisions are interesting, especially if you think about humans, right? Like we all have a timeline of finitude, right? So you have like, I'm a kid, I'm an adolescent, I'm a young adult, I'm figuring out things. I don't sleep for a while because I have young children. Then I've tried to figure out if I can retire. Then if I'm lucky, I do. And then I'm dead. And like things kind of flow. But with elves, with the serial longevity, the starting point has a lot more power to it because you are able to remember different access points to the light, which if you've read Silmarillion is a huge deal. And I thought, like, as someone that loves that, it was super cool how they managed to weave little things into it. So it helped the relational tension. You can see it playing out in the characters, but you don't have to like have 3 seasons of stuff just to get it, because ultimately you have these little friend pairings and relationship pairings, like like Elrond and Galadriel, or you got the buddies that are Harfoots, and then you got the friendship between Elrond and Durin, and
the stranger and the fireflies,
and the stranger and the fireflies.
But the pace,
I just love that.
Yeah. Yeah. No. I love the relationship you're talking about, because what they're doing narratively is they're taking all the themes of Tolkien and all of this pacing of like, we're getting to know the tension that Galadriel has as somebody who's one of the OG elves, and other people are skeptical of her when she knows what's up, and all these other elves and humans, and these tensions of relationships and moving forward, and how Sauron is ultimately going to use that to weaken the peoples of Middle Earth.
Kevin, I want to ask you a question, because as a musician and a singer and a poet, like, how do you relate to Tolkien's decision when telling a creation story for it to be music, and where the discord that ultimately, unravels the predicaments that lead to all the narratives that run through Tolkien is a discord that's described by taking place in music. And when we were talking, I told you, like, the first time I watched it, I was completely distracted by the visuals and just how good the score was. And then the second time I was like, oh, junk. Like, it's actually like got good story, and the characters are great. And the actress for Galadriel's face is like perfect for the role. But like, when you think of the big story, that the whole creation story is music, and that's where it's used to describe discord. Like, how do you relate to that as someone who's spent their life thinking about singing and music and composition?
I mean, music is so wide. It's so expansive. One of the things that I have obviously we're into the 2nd episode right now, and I'm hoping for to hear more from the dwarves, their language, to hear more from the Harfoots or the Harefeet. Music is so expansive. There's so many different types of music that literally can be traced back to kind of a few ideas that just exploded, and everybody created their own thing. I feel like there's just such a beautiful canvas in Tolkien's world, where so many different types of beings are expounded on, and I feel like music is a hugely important part of that world and storytelling. And I want more of that. Actually, I want more from the spectrum. I want to hear what a Harfoot musical festival sounds like. Dad's talking on a podcast right now. Okay. They're letting me know the dinner bell rang at 7:42. It's an intense question, because I feel like music is especially with film, music just kind of sometimes gets the background attention. And I love the fact that you were listening to what was going on. I don't know this particular conductor. I don't know who was doing the music, but I do know whoever was doing it really put their love into it. I felt that from the very beginning of Rings of Power. And I feel like, it would be good to hear songs. It'd be good to hear poems put to music during this series. I don't want to get off base, but like, have you read Patrick Rothfuss, In the Name of the Wind, which is another great fantasy novel? And it's really about a musician traveling from place to place in this expansive world, and how music actually plays into all the politics, and it's a really interesting fantasy series because it's about a musician. I think the elves have great music. I think the hobbits have great music. I'd like to hear all of that, the dwarvish music being played a little bit more. I mean, if you go back to, even the Rankin Bass animation, when the dwarves were singing the song about the Misty Mountain, some of the best songs in that whole animation series were from the dwarves.
Yeah, definitely.
But I love the expansive spectrum of music and how it relates to so many different people. And it's kind of like, music is the universal language. It binds us all together. And I think it's just as powerful as, magical rings. And so, yeah.
You're talking about different things, because the music really is like the universal language, where even Tolkien, like when Tolkien was alive and his stuff got super popular, lots of people were like, hey, can I adapt this? Can I make a play out of it? Whatever. And he was very protective. But there's one famous story of like a married couple in the 70s who started like a music company or something. And they wrote music, and you might know this, Kevin, but they wrote letters to him and sent him free music, and were like, hey, this music is basically named after your stuff, what's inspired us, like, do we have your permission? And it was one of the few times where he was moved and was like, yeah, these are beautiful, you kind of have my blessing, go for it. And so I think about the Rankin Bass thing, like you said, because that's the Hobbit film was the first thing I was ever exposed to as a kid, was with anything Tolkien. And I just think about the Misty Mountain songs, and obviously you've got The Greatest Adventure on your fantasy album. So I guess just, so this music, and I don't know if the Rankin Bass Hobbit was one of your first exposures as well, but like, what was your first exposure to Tolkien? And then like, how maybe even talk about how music maybe, lured you in, or what lured you in.
Thank you for asking the question, Nick. I have a very specific answer to that. And it's very strange. This was before I saw Rankin Bass. I was a small kid. I probably was like 9 or 10. And my parents were visiting, I think it was the Northwest. And we were visiting a friend, and that friend was a part of a play that was going on in a local theater. They were doing The Hobbit. And I remember going into the theater with my parents and seeing the setup on the stage. And I was sitting in the chair. Nobody else was in the theater but my parents, and everybody started coming out to rehearse. And it was immediately a musical experience. And they started playing a song, and I can't remember what scene it was, but I just remember there was something magical about it that still stands out in my mind. Seeing these people dressed up as hobbits in, probably really whatever antiquated ideas, the theater had at that time. But I just remember thinking, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. And it was musical. And that's what brought me in. And so when I saw Rankin Bass, their adaptation, it was magical. And the music connecting to Tolkien's words, there's nothing better. Frank Herbert is my, Dune is my number one favorite novel. Lord of the Rings comes right after. I don't know if the music of Dune could stack up with the music of Lord of the Rings, because there's so many great ideas for poem, verse, melody within Lord of the Rings. Not so sure about Dune. And I think that's the power. And I feel like, I'd like to hear more of that again. What about the Maiar, right? What would the songs of the Maiar be? And so the Gandalfs of this, world, and the Saurons of this world, what kind of music did they listen to? I'm interested. I want to know what wizards are going to play in their towers. Think about Saruman and this, crazy architectural, massive looking thing from, Baroquean nightmare, like a needle into the sky. I mean, what kind of music are you playing? I mean, it feels like it would be heavy metal, right? But it could be something different.
I mean, especially with Christopher Lee, and his heavy metal album before he died, Saruman singing heavy metal, it just fits.
Christopher Lee being in that series was just everything to me,
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the things that I really like about the choice of using music to communicate divine creativity is that the best account of any song is its performance. It's not looking at the sheet music or editing it to the perfect studio version.
Yeah.
If you love a studio version, it's because you played a song on a day where that song said to you what you didn't know you had words to say, right? Or you're at a show and all you know is that if you had the live version, it wouldn't be as good as what happened that night with your friends.
Yeah.
And that creation is so beautiful that it is a song that God is orchestrating, but it only works as an orchestration of the divine because creation cooperates in the divine harmony.
Mm.
And if you think of this big story, right? Like everyone knows this show ends, right? Like with this show ends with setting up for Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, right? And whatever the eschatological images looks like, what the hope is, right? Is it all of Marta creation learns to sing the harmonies of the divine so that each individual in their own voice and own giftedness participates in the song the divine is singing and humming, right? Like if that's where you're going and that's where you came from, that is such a beautiful framework for thinking about brokenness, anger. You see in this the kind of judgment and prejudice that runs through the first two episodes. The way pressure of the identity you get from your family, the way you inherit historic wrongs and relate to them. So many of the problems we all relate to are there. And yet because of Tolkien's universe, it goes, what would it be like for these to be moments that break in a song that was sung before you got here and will be sung again in harmony? How does that change how you relate to brokenness, systemic racism, the kind of judgment that breaks relationships, the kind of things that fracture your finitude? All of a sudden, what do you cling to? You cling to friendship. You cling to loyalty. You cling to honor in the face of defeat. All these virtues that are sitting there. And I think one of the reasons I love the music imagery and one of the reasons Tolkien is so powerful to me is if you know Tolkien, you can't tell any story without knowing the big story to get the point. And I think so many of us that were told the big story was this like very shitty, only one version that gets to be told Christian story if you're an American, but there's other versions that you only get one story. If it's like, if you deviate from this one plan or one thing, it all gets screwed up. But Tolkien actually creates a big story that weaves together all these different races and all these different communities who have the song of the Iluvatar woven in their culture, like Rohan. Right? Like if Rohan did not play the song, part of the song they had, you would not get out of the Two Towers alive. You would not have Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas let free when they needed to be, and which leads to the reunite. Like, there's so many little things in Tolkien that your situated contextual expression of the big story of reunion. If those situated contextual ones weren't celebrated in their diversity, you would not be able to sing a song where everyone's woven together in a divine harmony of diversity. And that big story is so compelling to me that like, that is the part of it that makes you go, and obviously we're watching them next to the Game of Thrones, which I like both series, but like, when you look at the Game of Thrones series, you go, there is no harmonies that are being sought here. Where we are in American history, I think we would like to know there's some harmonies that are possible. Yeah, across the difference and the disillusionment and the deconstructions and the breakdowns. And that to me was the compelling part, was not thinking everyone's going to have read it all a bunch of times like me, but that if you watched it, you thought Galadriel is humming with a story that demands, having touched the darkness, she goes back for the benefit of others. And if you're a Christian, you go Philippians 2, right? He who did not count equality with God something to be grasped, but humbled himself. But if you're a Buddhist, what do you know? The Bodhisattva, who what? Chose to forsake enlightenment for the benefit of others. And if you're Taoist, what? The one who did not absolve themselves into the way, but gave the invitation of the way. Like, I mean, we could go through a list. Each of the wisdom traditions value what? The heroes are the ones that know something they could grasp, but think handing it on open-handed at their own like vulnerability is peak hero. And her jumping in right as a crater lands and think, anyway, like Meteor Man lands, I was just like, oh hell yeah. And like that, the music is the framing. And I'll just say, Kevin, if you and Radagast don't have anything to talk about the Prancing Pony after having the mushroom tea, and you turn on the soundtrack, maybe in a basement, kind of like this one, and you were sitting on that couch at 1 a.m, you might just start crying listening to the soundtrack, because that Mordor theme is like when it gets to the Sauron song, it's like so intense. And then when it starts to weave the different things, anyway, sorry. That was
good. It's good. You that was wonderful. I mean, I think
preacher gets excited about Tolkien moment.
No, it's good. Music. I am so I'm honored by having this life that is surrounded by music. It is such a huge, wonderful existence to be able to, create. And I constantly create. I have this urge in me to constantly create something. I'm never satisfied unless I'm doing something new, and it's to the detriment of my career, most likely. I should have just stayed the line, right? And created this brand that everybody they know what I'm going to put out every time. But that's just not me. I mean, I love to, kind of journey where the muse takes me. And I think that's the beauty of Tolkien, is that it's so expansive and there's so many voices to be heard. And I go back to Bombadil. It's like, let's hear Bombadil's song. I want to hear that song. I'm interested. I'm really intrigued by where Rings of Power goes, because I knew that it was going to be good, and I loved all these kind of dissenting voices immediately. Oh, it's gonna suck. This is gonna be horrible. And I'm like, no, they had like so many people that were invested in this and were huge fans. There's no way this can be horrible. It might not be the best thing ever, but it's not going to be horrible. So I have so much hope that this goes in a wonderful direction, and that we get like, lots of great songs along the way.
Now, Nick, you can change our direction after this, but I would just say, Kevin, I heard a couple interviews with one of the executive people on the show, who mentioned that they knew how much music played a role in Tolkien, and so they the volume of songs per season goes up in their 50 episode arc.
Right.
And I was just like, that's awesome, because as someone who did have optimism when the Hobbit series came out, once they got done singing the Misty Mountain song in the first movie of the Hobbit, it was like, well, that didn't turn out as well.
I just hope it doesn't go full on classic the whole time. You know, it's like the overtures are great, but it's like, I want to hear the song from Peregrine Took. You know what I mean? Like, I want to hear a single voice.
Harfoot's drinking songs.
I want to hear the stranger evoking some prog rock thing in the woods. You know, there's so many opportunities to create cool musical moments. I mean, the elves have got this beautiful kind of, dissonant, majestic things going on. The hobbits have their kind of pub music. I want to know what the dwarves have got. They're deep and dark, and I think the dwarves are the alternative indie artists of the film, or the idea, and should be thrown a spotlight more often than they get.
I kind of want to just stay on the musical thing too, because you just connected to such a personal part of you, Kevin. I'm thinking even the lore here, because even Tripp and I have talked multiple times about how Tolkien has kind of filled in certain gaps in our lives, or even just made sense of our experiences, even in a place that maybe some religious, language and traditions and liturgies haven't. Maybe, I don't know if that's true for your Tripp, but it's true for me. Where and you were talking about we're talking about harmony and all these different things. The way that when men first come to Middle Earth, so the elves have been here, men come, one of the elves finds them in the woods, and it's either Finrod or Fingolfin, can't remember, but he finds them and he picks up one of the while the men are sleeping, and Fingolfin or Finrod picks up one of the harps of the men and starts playing music on it. And the men wake up and it's the most beautiful thing they've ever heard. But before that, they were scared of elves, and thinking about how, we have this, preclusion or bias towards sameness or familiarity. And if they were invited to go hear an elf lord sing on a harp, they might be like, that's ridiculous. That's scary. We can't do that. And so, but when it's introduced, it changes the course of history. And so,
absolutely. I was going to say, it's like the thing. Another thing that's missing is the darkness. Like the orcs have to have music.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, these are elves that have been twisted by whatever, but it's like they have anthems. And it's just kind of like, if you look at the biblical text of Lucifer being this angel of music, and it's like, I want to hear Sauron's music, like it's got to be the most amazing thing ever to be heard, to be able to kind of sway all these, strange, twisted creations to his bidding call. But anyway, sorry.
No, I actually think that's important, right? Like, one of the things that runs through Tolkien is that no one is actually ultimately evil. Like, everything that exists comes from the one who is good and loving. And so even the orcs, right? Like, their issue is the privation of the good. This is a theme that it gets explored throughout the monotheistic religions. Like, if you only have one ultimate high deity that makes things, then how do you get bad? Right? It's not because you have a dualism where there's bad and good in a giant battle for all eternity. It's that what was given as good gets perverted, right? And so then what is evil is ultimately related to what is alluring, what generates desire in you for something less than the ultimate. And the idea, now, when you said that, because I was already thinking Gandalf as prog rocker, right, is Sauron, like, comes out on stage and starts doing harmonics on top of said guitar solo, but then goes like off key, and you're like, that's kind of weird. But that also he is shredding, right? And then everyone's like, wow, and they and I give that. I mean, it's kind of jokey, but the temptation in our culture is to define a list of people. Oh, let me locate them. Okay, this is good or this is bad, right? And what Tolkien wants us to see is what, namely, that the binary, those divisions are not ultimately helpful, because the origin of all things comes from the Song of the One, and where they're going is the embrace of the One. So then what does it mean, right, for the generation of songs that pull you apart from the main theme? What are they using? The gifts of Iluvatar, of God. It's music that ends up pulling away, right? And so it's this, Paul uses a language that prohibitions generate desire, and when it goes to, oh, we make a rule, and the moment you say don't do it, then all of a sudden people are like, really? And I know, Kevin, you're doing the punk version of DC Talk Song, so if you do the punk version of I Don't Want It, you will re-explore the way certain songs generate desire. But the that kind of the way that gets picked up in Tolkien is that what generates the desire is alternative beauties. So it's not that they're not beautiful, it's just that they're not rightly ordered. Like that your love gets ordered wrongly is what is ultimately perverse, not that you love evil. And I think that really helps. Yeah, dissonance. It's what it really helps you look at the one you define yourself against differently, when you realize that ultimately you're members in the same orchestra.
I'm so interested and intrigued by Eastern music because of this. Eastern music consistently does some dissonant things that Western music doesn't even have a handle on. And so when I listen to Eastern music, it taps into a whole different idea of notes that hasn't been on the palette yet, and it's kind of like, I absolutely believe that music should be looked at as a spectrum, and if it's not, it's lopsided. And so I'm really hoping that Rings of Power brings out some very dissonant tones, and we experiment a little bit, But yes, really great points, Trip. I love that.
So
my glasses. All right. So I can see you. I got so emotional about what you were saying that I had to take my glasses.
All right. So I want to know what y'all's favorite part was in the first two episodes. What was the moment, if your friend was like, oh, I've been thinking about watching it, because the 25 million people that watched it in the first day, I wasn't one of them. And I got this from people that love the books. These are the people I had to convince. They were like, oh, and I got emails from people that have been in this class that were like, well, I know we've done this class, it's been great, but I'm not sure I'm going to watch the show, so I don't know if I'm going to keep hanging out with you. And now I had a scene that I was like, you should really just watch the first two for this. But I'm interested, if you were doing the sell to someone that's interested, and is like, I don't want someone to ruin this for me. Like, what moment are you going to go for it? Nick, you can go first, and then Kevin and I came. But I'm very interested in which parts you're going to pick out.
This is what I've been telling people, because I've had people who are very skeptical, or they really like Game of Thrones and they like fantasy, and of course they hear like, oh, it's just kind of a mediocre fantasy series or something like that. And so I try to, because people usually know how much of a Tolkien nerd I am. And so I'll say, hey, my expectations were I was open, but I was very tame about it. I wasn't going to be like, this is going to be the most loyal, amazing one-to-one thing that's there as far as Tolkien adaptations go. But I've told people that when it comes to the stuff that's more in sync with Tolkien's original writings, pleasantly, like overabundantly surprised at how in sync the show is with Tolkien's themes, histories, and even character development. Like, it's all there. But one of the things that even too that I've said, but one of my favorite things that I was really surprised at was the Arondir and Bronwyn thing. You know, Arondir is and Bronwyn are totally original characters. Their names are totally original. Bronwyn is a Welsh, a common Welsh woman's name. And I was like, this could be good for as far as story pacing. But I think just talking about I think you hit on something, Trip, even between like Galadriel and Elrond and the tension and how Arondir and Bronwyn's tension of just being a human and elf and these experiences. And Bronwyn comes from these people that they have a history of siding with Morgoth, and how their relationship ends up leading them to find out that orcs are coming on the run, are underground coming back. And I absolutely loved it. Ends up leading them to find out.
Did you just hear yourself talk for a second?
I did just hear myself talk. That's why I was stopped. That was strange.
Okay, sorry. I have no idea how that happened, but it was super creepy. And
cool.
All right.
More of that, please. Radagast and I are asking.
I know. I've actually been drinking Radagast mushroom tea the whole time. Yeah, Kevin. What about you? What about you as your favorite things? I'm curious.
I can tell you my least favorite was the immediate conversation with Galadriel as a little girl, and then you have this elf that's speaking to her. I can't remember what the character was, but he had like a haircut from like 2008, and like elves should not have the undercut where it's literally shaved underneath, and then you have the perfectly coiffed flip. It's like, somebody else said that's like corporate banker hairstyles, on all the elves. And I had to agree. It was like, wow. I mean, what's going on with the hair? My favorite scene, just right off the bat, was Elrond and Durin having a conversation, at his dinner table with his wife. I thought that was really great. I loved the, breaking through Durin's pride and him, becoming emotional for the first time and realizing that Elrond was truly his friend and he had to, give some latitude. I thought that was wonderful. I also loved the scene with Galadriel, jumping off the ship, and, choosing to help, Middle Earth. And I feel that in my own deconstruction. Oh, sorry, I won't go there. But it was some amazing, like, 2 episodes where, you're kind of wanting to go so much deeper with all these different, quadrants of the universe of the Middle Earth. And I'm hoping they go bigger. They get older and they go to Valinor, and we see, the creating of Morgoth and Melkor and all of that stuff. To me, is so a huge part of this. It's like, Eru, created these, I don't know how many immediate Maiar there are. What, you guys might know that better, know that kind of the creation of the whole world before Middle Earth is really interesting to me. I'm always into the origin of angels idea. Like, where does the origin come from? Why did Eru decide to create these certain beings, giving them free will? Melkor Morgoth decided to go his own way and take magic into a different direction. That's great. I just, I'm intrigued where that goes, and I hope they get on that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, definitely on my list of favorite moments were the friendships, and my second favorite was the Elrond and Durin, and that scene, which, by the way, I have to say, I told one friend who had some, I don't know what you want to call them. The generous term might be alt-right adjacent friends, or incel familiar friends who were just like real pissed that they're not just all pasties and Middle Earth. Like if you watched, like if you went to the Mines of Moria and weren't just thrilled with the visuals and the dwarvish music, and like that, you get an actual dwarf, like you get the vibe of dwarvish. Like Lord of the Rings, Gimli plays the like the humor bit more often than he does in the book, right? Like there you get the humor bit you get from Gimli, but you also get like the dwarvish kind of like pride, and but like pride in a good way, not like pride like like he values his people, and this they call this a mine, right? Like you see all that, but then like you meet his wife and his kids, and I'm like, if you watch that, if you've ever had a friend where you screwed up, and because the people that love him know they love you, they force you to work junk out.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't like that scene. Like that's like a basic human thing, but an elf and dwarf told it to us.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, this is what Tolkien learned. You tell a big story where the source of all existence is out for resurrection, reunion, reconciliation, and all sorts of beautiful things. And then the key to it are friends. And that moment was my second favorite. My favorite was it the Harfoots. Like I was most questionable about like proto hobbits. I'm like, oh my God, they got to stick these things in because they think they need to have it. Like, don't they understand how cool the elves are? Blah, 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 blah. And then you get two little friends, and they like this perfect combination of Merry, Pippin / Frodo and Sam energy. And then like you get the call to wander beyond the boundaries of your people and the demands of being your people sitting there. And it generates this compassionate response for a stranger in the midst of fear and disillusionment. And all of that. I'm sitting there going like, oh my God, there is a high chance that in 4 or 5 years, when the last episodes of this comes out, I'm like crying because one of them gets hurt. Like that, I already knew it could happen because what do you know about the hobbits is that their deep commitment to their people and the level of friendship generates the ability to resist the call of power, prestige, and possessions that humans know not how to resist. And if you ask me, in the first 2 episodes, do I believe the Harfoots have a better grasp of what it means to be human than all the humans in the show? I'm going to say, hell yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought, I trust these people. I'm going to have some fun. Do I want to quibble and wish they'd paid enough for the Silmarillion rights so we could have seen a giant spider take down the trees? Sure. And at the eschaton, I'm sure Jesus will work this out for those of us that feel this is their second favorite sacred text. But like, I'm just saying, like the Harfoots made me go, the people they were creating almost ex nihilo out of nothing. I thought that is a Tolkien vibe. There is nothing more Tolkien than making everyone in these grand stories hang out with 2 adolescent friends who ultimately, their story is as important as Galadriel and Elrond and all that kind of stuff. Like that made me just pump. But again, Elgin, who's gone to bed, my 14-year-old, we discuss it, and he's like, oh my God, Dad, did you realize if there was reincarnation, your goal is to get resurrected as a hobbit? And I was like, well, not the worst thing. The worst thing.
No. I want to know, okay, going back to this again, I want to know what the orc lifestyle is like. The poor orcs we don't get to see that spectrum of their comfort. We understand Hobbit, Harfoot comfort. We understand elven comfort. We get dwarf comfort, but where's the orc comfort? I'm sure they've got, some form of, what's the German drink that's black and is really sweet? I'm trying to think. Jägermeister. It's like it's like the orcs are drinking their Jägermeister, and you know, they're
So
listening.
you're associating them with frat boys. That's what I'm hearing.
I'm associating them within my own, limited imagination. But I'd like to see more from that side as well.
I think we're going to get that, Kevin. I think so. So I've seen stuff where they're going to be exploring some of the undertones of like what orc culture could look like, because it's very briefly hinted at in Lord of the Rings, where when they capture Merry and Pippin, and I think that in the books, when they are wounded and they're tired and they can't run anymore, the orcs give them a type of drink, like a whiskey of some sort, but it's gross to them. But like you said, it's a version of their Jägermeister.
They're on the road
And-
though. They're in wartime. That's like they're running during a war. It's like I want to see them in their own, comfort habitat where they've got the Chinese rug and their their deer chandeliers and
oh yeah,
what they talk about.
I'm gonna DM you. There's a whole thread on Twitter, and and it shows the leaked images of what the orc material culture could look like in their own domain. It's pretty nerdy and fun.
Nice. I love that.
Cam, I just want to make an observation for those people that, especially those that may be listening to this later on a podcast because Kevin was on. I just want to know that if you were asking for what kind of individuals that you would trust taking their questions and doubts seriously, it would be the ones that ask the questions and are intrigued by the life of what is prescribed by culture to be the enemy. Now, you may be saying, Trip, why are you such an orc lover? I don't know. But let's say that you took Jesus seriously and who said to love your enemy and pray for those that persecute you and all that kind of thing. Like then you're fascinated by those kinds of questions. And Kevin, one of the things that, and Nick may know more about this, but just as someone who has been hanging out in this class and then read a number of books because I didn't want to be embarrassed talking to Tolkien scholars. You tell me if this is right, Nick. This is my guess. If you look at the people that track how Tolkien edits over time, there are a number of tropes that existed in the early versions he edits out. For example, early Hobbit's a good example. Dwarves have a kind of caricature Jewishness to them. Orcs are the big baddies, and they don't have subjectivity and consciousness to be dealt with, and this kind of thing. Oh, the Southerners and these kind of things in the big battle. And towards the end of Two Towers, where they get attacked. Sam and Frodo and Gollum get it, or in the middle of the battle, and so on. And if you look at the edits over time and the way he wrestled with his story, he thought, and this is his own experience coming out of war, and then realizing the World War I didn't settle things, that when Sam looks at the dead Southlander and says, I wonder what story it was he was in, basically, that led him to be in this battle as well. Right? Not, oh, you communist, socialist, or like you evil, like terrorists, or whatever stories we tell towards our enemies, right? Like he knew that there was a story where it made sense for him to be there. The dwarves, the stereotypes break down. The orcs, in each edit, get more personality and more interaction. All those things, to me, I think are beautiful and are a perfect example of what healthy deconstruction of any ideology and story you're born into looks like. It's not that story may not be compelling and beautiful. It's just that if that story becomes a monologue that demands the outside be damned, then it's problematic. And Tolkien's edits were all over time were to more humanize and more enrich and more acknowledge the complexity of the other. Like now, Nick, I know you know more about this. Like that's my general take, having spent the last month and a half reading and listening to a lot of this. But
you don't give yourself enough credit. You know Tolkien, dude.
Not like I can't keep up with like the 4 kinds of elves and that kind of stuff. But do you think that's an accurate summary?
100%, yeah.
No, here's the part that I love, and this is one of the reasons I was excited to have this conversation, Kevin, It's like you and I probably were born in very similar spaces in American religious context. One kind of people, a certain kind of people get celebrated because they rehearse the arguments to stay the same. And others get celebrated because they demand the story they're living in be big enough to include the people they encounter. And if you look at Tolkien's story and the way he edits, he doesn't forsake, right, the big musical story that ends in ultimate harmony of all things participating in the divine symphony, but he does expand things where the dissonance becomes more human and becomes more fragile and becomes a deeper part of what's being woven together. And I think, I don't know, I just find that really compelling. And that's one of the things I really liked. Well, I really liked about the Sad Astronauts album, which was Kevin's last Kickstarter album. I've been rocking it on a consistent basis, but my Sad Astronauts t-shirt was dirty. I went around looking for it to wear.
Tooth and nail on instead, right? That's good. It's a good choice.
Well, that's what everyone that graduated in 2000 from high school and my friend group wore. Is your tooth and nail shirts. And because I bought them big, I can still wear them.
Very smart. I mean, as a 55-year-old man, they tell you shrink as you get older. It's not my case. I've not been shrinking. But I'm definitely the form of a very happy hobbit right now. And I'm absolutely happy with that part of my journey or progression. Yeah. Again, thank you so much for having me. I don't know how much longer we're talking, but I really love, the world of Tolkien. It informs so much of who I am as an artist. If you go back to Stereotype B, my first solo album in 2000, a lot of, the idea, the imagery, was the Tolkien world was subconsciously ingrained in who I was, just as the Frank Herbert world was. And it comes out in songs like Shaping Space. And so, I've never written a Tolkien song inspired by, and so that's a great, I want to do that. It's a good challenge to myself. I did write one for Frank Herbert's Dune, though. It was called End of the Beginning, and it was basically about the metamorphosis of Paul into the worm and his son, and saying no to the megalomaniac power that he had. Anyways, I don't want to get off into Dune world in the middle of a Tolkien, podcast. What am I doing? No, stop.
So I want to ask you one question real quick, and then you can set up the song. What inspired the Gandalf as OG Deconstructor tweet?
Say it again. What?
Well, you made the joke about Gandalf deconstructing, and it was very entertaining to look at the responses. And
I was hoping for better responses, actually. I thought this.
All right, so the listeners need to step up, is what you're saying.
The responses were mediocre at best. I feel like Gandalf has been such a great ideal for us to look at. Again, going back to what you were saying about the hobbits, it's like, he could have been highbrow and hung out with Saruman in his tower. He could have, taken on all sorts of different guises, because if he is a Maiar, right, he can shapeshift. He can teleport into any part of the universe. And here he is hanging out in Hobbiton at the Shire, smoking Longbottom Leaf, with Bagginses and Proud Feet. And it just is such a great, character, because he's got all this power, but he looks for the intentionality of love between characters and care, And so I'm looking forward to seeing the, what would it be? The genesis of Gandalf in this series. I have no clue where that's going. I mean, everybody's talking about the stranger. Is that Gandalf? Is it Sauron? is it like one of the blue wizards? And I just don't think any of us know yet.
Right. Agreed.
Yeah.
All right. So I want you to so here's what's going to happen for those on the live stream, which this probably get edited out. But Kevin's been requested to go eat dinner 22 minutes ago.
On my
So
10-year-old, she lets me know. She keeps me on my schedule.
all
She's
right.
like,
Well, Daddy has to be fed. So
just hang out with me.
okay. So I want you to set up the whole the invitation to partner for the Kickstarter where they get the album, the fantasy album. Tell us about it and such. Then I will play the song after that. And once I start playing it, Kevin, you go eat dinner. Then I have like 3 uber nerdy questions for Nick after the song is played, and I go grab another beer. So like if you, that's what this is a taunt basically for the listener. Like I have 3 questions for Nick. I'm going to try to stump him on Tolkien nerdery, but I want to make sure everyone knows about your Kickstarter, about I want them to set up the greatest adventure. I mean, if you're the right age, you have watched the Hobbit cartoon enough times to know what's about to go down. And I'll just say, I really enjoyed it. And I actually have Somewhere Over the Rainbow also quality move.
The soundtrack to the Rankin Bass film, the animated film, was the first vinyl album I ever had. So if you can imagine,
that was the Horn of Gondor.
You had a booklet that you were able to look through, and it was the voice of Glenn Yarborough, who is a folk singer that captured my attention immediately. And he sang Greatest Adventure. And it just kind of stuck with me throughout, my years as being one of those moments where you're just captivated by a song and you keep going back to it throughout your life. I've decided to make this, fantasy EP. We were kind of experimenting with a couple of different songs. One of them was David Bowie's As the World Falls Down from Labyrinth. And that was one of the first songs I wanted to do because Labyrinth was another big film that I loved. But I wanted to take this David Bowie song, which was, a little bit cheesy when it came to the soundtrack. And I wanted to change it and make it a little bit more immediate, strip back all the production and make it really minimal. And when we did that, it was just my voice and a stand-up bass. We were like, oh, this is really interesting because we're creating space. We're making these songs, even more moody and expressive and mystical. So then I went, what are the fantasy films that, inspire me from that mystical, mysterious thing? And, that idea. And we had several songs to play with, but we came to Greatest Adventure, and I was like, I really want to make this sound like it's trapped in time, where it's outside of, everything that's happening in 2022 right now. I don't want it to sound like that. I want it to sound like it's been teleported from 1973 or wherever. And I think we did a good job of that. Another song that's on the record that is a bit of a strange one is a song called Temple of the King. And it's a rainbow song, and it had nothing to do with a fantasy film. It's just that lyrically, I remember this song growing up, hearing this rainbow album from a friend of mine down the street, thinking, oh, this is the medieval, imagery. It's like Arthurian legend kind of vibes. And so I went to that idea. If I had my druthers, as they say, I'd have a double album of, all sorts of songs that are in this kind of genre. We covered Never Ending Story, which is kind of interesting. We took that happy Lamal Kajagoogoo version and completely stripped everything back and made it sound as sad and moody as possible. We also did that with Rainbow, which Over the Rainbow is like one of those songs you just don't mess with. It's like covering Sergeant Pepper, you know? It's like, what are you doing? And so I'm always up for a challenge, and I felt like, you know, this is my moment. I'm 55, and I don't know what I'll do next. And if this is my last statement to the world, I'm excited about it. You know.
I mean, you
That's
captured
awesome.
what you were saying. I mean, I don't want to keep you too long. I think you did for both songs you've released. I think that you said you kind of made it spacey, teleported it, you know, to now. And I think there's a sort of literary quality that you've achieved where it's stripped down enough that the listener's imagination can kind of fill in the gaps. And that's
Cool.
It's pretty sweet.
We did the spoken word, you know, couple of lines from Tolkien because I felt like that needed to be in there. The fantasy EP sets on a Kickstarter called Winter Woods, and basically it's if you Google Kevin Max Kickstarter Winter Woods, you'll find it. What I'm doing is I'm making a Christmas album for my mother, who basically loves my music, but she's 80. She's kind of fighting against this very aggressive form of dementia. Last year, she said, "Why haven't you done more Christmas albums?" And I was trying to explain it to her, and she had moments of lucidity a year ago, and we had this conversation, and I said, I just don't like Christmas music, Mom. All Christmas music has been like done to, after Bing Crosby and Nat King Cole, what can you do? After Frank Sinatra, I mean, who's going to make Christmas better than that? It's impossible. But she thought my Holy Night record that I made in 2004 was really great. And so I was like, all right, I will try the impossible and I'll make a Christmas record that I think you can be proud of and that I can be proud of as well. So that's what started the Kickstarter. Fantasy had already been made, except for a couple songs. So we threw that out there. So if you go to my Kickstarter for Winter Woods and, give to the Kickstarter, you immediately get Fantasy as a download. Even if we hit our goal or not, it's there. You get it. It's a gift, So on the next thing from Fantasy we're doing is horror. We're doing horror films. I'm experimenting with big songs that stood out to me because I'm a horror film fan. I'll have to do an orc song. I'll have to write an orc song in there.
Ooh.
Nick.
Hell yeah. Yes, please.
And then after horror, we're going to do drama. So we're doing a trilogy of tunes. And the only thing that matters to me is that I do Music of the Night from Phantom of the Opera. It's the only thing on my wish list or my hit list right now that has to happen because I've always wanted to be the Phantom. I could have been a contender.
Okay, can I ask you a question about that song specifically? When I was a musical theater major and stuff, that was one of the songs I used for audition. If I woke up and thought I have all my notes today, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. Because you you can hit the notes, but the sliding between kind of the different, is this a chest note? I'm going to go to falsetto. I'm going to slide it. And I have to have enough control and stuff. How many days a week can you get up and confidently do that? Because I feel like right about 30, the dissension went down crazy as to not like, could you hit it? Like, oh, I'll just like straight up belt this junk. But Music of the Night, that's one of those ones, if someone does it and it's like a B+, that whatever their like baseline singing is just makes you feel impoverished. And you are kind of like, I don't know, one of the greatest singers I know. So is that song intimidating to you, or are you just like, I know it, like, give me a take?
Great question. I mean, it is certainly intimidating because of how great of a song it is. It's like Nature Boy by Eden Abez. You know, one of the greatest songs ever written, Unchained Melody, one of the greatest songs ever written. When Elvis sung Unchained Melody, he didn't mess around. He had to create something special in that moment. And that's how I feel when I sing, you know, songs as big as this. You've got to create a moment for yourself. You've got to challenge yourself to kind of create something that's not been done before. It's the impossible step. You know, it's like I think of, Raiders of the Lost Ark stepping out into the, invisible bridge. You have to take the invisible step and risk everything in order for it to be amazing. And you're probably 9 times out of 10 going to fall down the chasm, but that one time that you can actually make that step and it works, then you've got magic,
Yeah. Music of the night. If you have a Kickstarter, that means I get to listen to Kevin sing my favorite musical theater hits. That, I picked one of the higher levels this time, but let's just say, as a musical theater / philosophy major that realized those student loans can't be conquered by $20,000 of debt forgiveness, one of the few things you get is donating to someone you like to sing songs that you know. And you're like, maybe if they sing it and I play it in front of my kids, they'll be like, I like that, Dad. And you're like, you do? Let me
my wife my wife is a theater music nerd. And so, the idea of doing the drama is that we want to do. I mean, I'm an Arthurian legend freak. My favorite after Tolkien, after Frank Herbert, it's Hawk of May by Gillian Anderson. And so I've got to do a song from Camelot, right? So that it has to happen. So then you start to nerd out on all these great songs. I mean, I was Joseph in the Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I did that in 2003 in California. Was one of the gigs that I did. It was off Broadway. I was Joseph for about a month and a half, and so I had to learn all those songs.
What? And is this on the internet, Kevin?
It could be. It could be also that I bought all the rights to every recording ever made, and I hold them in mine own mind of Moria. Nobody can touch it. No, but it's probably out there somewhere. It's the one dream that I have all the time that gives me anxiety, is that I'm on the stage doing a theater production and I forget my lines. And it's like, that became real when I did Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat, because it was the first time that I actually had to have lines and I had to act as well. And the thing is, when you grow up on the stage creating music all the time, you know your songs, you know where you're going to stand, you know how when you do something that throws you out of your comfort zone like that, it's so mind-boggling. There's so much fear, and I had to get over that. I had to say, you know what, you can do this. And every night, it's just the songs that kept me going. My acting, I was hating myself every moment in my own head, but I came to the moment where I sang and I was happy. So Phantom, if anybody out there listening wants to, give me the job as Phantom for any kind of production, I'll even do like your high school theater production of Phantom. You just got to pay me enough to pay my bills.
Well, if you do a musical album, as someone that was a giant fan of your music from the time testosterone first burst through my veins, if you did one song Glory from Rent, we had an argument when I was in theater school, because I did that song one time for one of our where people are doing different music.
Who knew we were going to go here on a Tolkien talk? You know what I mean?
No, but this is like my chance to advocate that if you're going to do a Kickstarter for musical theater, there was someone like, no one, why did you do one song Glory Trip? There's like literally no chance you could do it better than the original. I was like, Well, I'm not saying I did, but I'm pretty sure Kevin could. I got it, and it led to an argument where I was just like, no, listen. And I pulled out some bootlegs of your previous band's work. And I'm like, no, this is live. You listen to this? Like you can't tell me that One Song Glory couldn't be leveled up with someone that doesn't have the strain in those last three notes and has sexy ass vibrato. Like One Song Glory with the vibrato, it leveled up. That was Tripp's argument. And I made it passionately enough that high school friends have brought it up since then.
I love you for that. I'm just saying. I'm up to the challenge. I feel like that was a missed opportunity for me to get into theater and, sing in, it's a missed opportunity for me to sing in Disney. I mean, I should be singing everything. And so that's my hashtag is Kevin Max sings everything. One of the fantasy, it starts with fantasy and hopefully it goes into musical theater for you, Trip.
All right. Now, Kevin, you can go eat dinner. I'm going to play The Greatest Adventure while I grab a beer. And then I have 3 super nerdy questions for Nick. But thank you for hanging out, Kevin. It's been a blast.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. So much fun.
Thank you, everybody watching. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Trip. It's been fun. I can't wait to see. When does the next episode come out again?
Well, next week we're hanging out with Master Anthony from the Bald Move podcast, who's also a specialist in Second Temple period Judaism, but he runs one of the biggest Game of Thrones podcasts. So we're all hanging out next time, and then after that, I think Brian Zahn is coming. And anyway, we're gonna have some fun.
I didn't ask about your show. I was asking about Rings of Power.
It comes out Thursday.
At
Thursday
what time?
night.
Thursday.
I think it's 9 p.m. Eastern time.
There you go.
Think of me. Take a shot of beer every time you see an orc that has any kind of emotion in his face.
Ooh.
and yeah. So hey, thank you guys.
All righty. See you later, Kevin.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
All righty. So I'm going to hit this. And I'd say this is in the last week and a half since I've had it, the 17th time I've listened to it, if that gives you an idea of my appreciation. But I'm going to go grab a beer. And I'll be right back, Nick. Because you better buckle your safety belt because I have a few questions for you.
I did not see this coming. I'm going to...
Greatest adventure is what lies ahead. Today and tomorrow are yet to be said. The chances, the changes are all yours to make. The mold of your life is in your hands to break. The greatest adventure is there if you're bold. Let go of the moment that life makes you hold. To measure the meaning can make you delay. It's time you stop thinking and wasting the day. A man who's a dreamer who never takes leave, who thinks of a world that is just make-believe, will never know passion, will never know pain, who sits by the window will one day see rain. The greatest adventure is what lies ahead. Today and tomorrow are yet to be said. The chances, the changes are all yours to make. The mold of your life is in your hands to break. A man who's a dreamer who never takes leave, who thinks of a world that is just make-believe, will never know that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. The old that is strong does not wither. Deep roots are not reached by the frost. The greatest adventure is what lies ahead. Today and tomorrow are yet to be said. The chances, the changes are all yours to make. The mold of your life is in your hands to break. Greatest adventure is what lies ahead. The greatest adventure is what lies ahead.
Oh, yeah. All right, Nick. One, I just want to say thanks to Kevin for hanging out with us. That was fun.
Oh yeah, I second that. Thanks, man. That guy, man, he is so nerdy. When he said, "You know what I like more than Tolkien, though, Dune," I was like, "Oh damn, oh damn."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, there's no reason we shouldn't have a follow up after the next Dune movie, you know? But
Absolutely.
so I have 3 questions for you. And these are 3 questions I was asked by multiple people who were like, Trip, you're my nerdy Tolkien friend. And I didn't have I didn't have like a confident answer. And so I said to myself, this is a fun way of concluding some Tolkien head excitement. 3 questions. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready. I think maybe.
Maybe. All right, number 1, the stranger. How, as someone who knows things, what would be your power ranking of possibility on the stranger? Right, like I think a lot of people, oh Sauron, oh Gandalf, a blue wizard, Tom Bombadil. I mean, there's a lot of live options of characters we know. It could be someone we don't, but like having watched it a couple times, having an awareness of it, what's your power ranking on a possibility?
My power rank. Okay, so my power ranking is I'm gonna do the top 3 because I think those are the most viable options. Everything else after that is just like left field, crazy speculation. Don't think it's gonna happen, but it's fun. My number 1, I'm still in the Sauron camp. I think it's Sauron. That's my number 1.
And why?
Number 2.
No, you have to.
Oh, explain. I will.
Yeah.
Okay. So
explain so that people can repeat it as if they thought it this way and impress their friends. That's the whole goal here.
Okay.
Nick, is to give people a cheat code to impress their friends. So later,
I
right.
will instill the knowledge like magma, and give you a ring of power and form it like Celebrimbor, who is in there, and he's a kind of a gilf. So anyway, yeah. So Sauron's my number
Indian
1.
Ilf.
Oh, true. He is. That'd be a tough one. An Ilf. I like it. So Sauron's my number 1 because I think they're trying to throw us off. So when Galadriel jumps in the water, the clouds open immediately after we see a meteor. So it implies that Valinor has sent something over. I think that's what they're trying to do with the visuals. They're saying Valinor have sent somebody over. And if that's the case, it would either be an Astari of some sort or a Maiar of some sort. And I think they're doing this intentionally. So the hobbits are kind. They want to help people. Sauron is like the number 1 deceiver. He basically deceives everyone and makes a fair form and gets everyone on his side except for Galadriel and Gil-galad and Elrond. They're the only people on the entire planet basically that see through Sauron's BS. And so I think that they're trying to be like, oh, secret fire, little, bearded man from Valinor, but I really think that the symbol that he makes, that when he carves it,
Yeah.
kind of looks like a rough. A lot of people are saying it looks like Gandalf's G, which I agree, but it also kind of looks like Sauron's symbol too, very roughly. And then, of course, when he tries to make fire with the fireflies in the sky and the fireflies die,
Yeah, he
felt
kills him.
very unsettling. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So Sauron, most plausible. Number 2.
Gandalf. I think they're trying
Gandhi.
to, and I'm like really close. It might even be tie between Gandalf and Sauron, but Gandalf is the wielder of the secret fire. I mean, he is the holder of the fire ring at some
Which isn't
point.
made yet.
No, it's not made yet, but they might be doing some foreshadowing, which would be
Yeah.
very Tolkien-esque. And even so, when he talks in the second episode, when he has the fireflies, he is speaking Quenya. And this isn't by my translation, this because I don't speak Quenya or read it, but it translates to what is fire, or which could be like secret fire, or yeah. So basically that. So basically hinting at secret fire. And all the reasons I gave before about Valinor,
Yeah.
Gandalf loves the hobbits. There you go.
Yeah, he's a Hobbit fan.
Right.
And that's the one of the other things that made me think lean Gandalf was when Gandalf comes back after fighting the Balrog. Gandalf the Grey comes back Gandalf the White because Saruman, is demoted and stuff for his problems with Sauron.
Yeah.
And when he encounters Gimli, Legolas, and Aragorn, and they're like, "Oh, Gandalf," and he has this moment where he's like recollecting, like, "Oh, I've had all these incarnations as an eternal divine servant. Oh, that is what they used to call me," right? Like he has this moment where, and you can see by the time he's hanging out with Merry and Pippin and stuff at the end, he's like recollected stuff, and he's like, "Oh, I'm back." But it seems like there's some drag time.
Yeah. And we talked
and
about
if you've only watched the movies, which might be the people they're signaling at, because 25 million people watch this,
right.
Playing on that is also either a key for affirming Gandalf or for, sneaking around, which you mentioned this briefly, but it in the appendices that we have, it mentions Sauron in the Second Age being super sly and appearing in other forms. So since the intro had Sauron in the pokey hat that you think of before in the movies, Isildur cuts the ring off, what's all entailed in this shape-shifting fair form that might make the Gandalf double take move? That's in some sense why you pick Sauron over Gandalf.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Sauron can still shapeshift. Sauron loses the ability to shapeshift after he makes the One Ring, basically because he is Oh no, it's not. Yeah. That's right. It's because he makes the one, so he instills his essence into the One Ring and loses a ton of his power, and so he can't shapeshift. And I think at this point, because he's still able to shapeshift and he is a deceiver, that is a large portion of why I'm still in the Sauron camp for the Stranger.
And like his shapeshifting was significant. Like he was a werewolf kind of thing, right? Like that's when you see Galadriel mourning over her brother's body, and there's like the mark. But if you get the Silmarillion and everything, like it was wolf version.
Yeah, and it's in Beren Luthien, which that's where Finrod dies. Which
great
is not a
audiobook if you've never listened to it. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Beren and Luthien.
Amazing. And
makes you hug your partner deeply.
It does. Like I've talked about with Steve Yandel. I read that poem and love my wife more each time I read it. But there's a part where Huon, who's this giant Maiar dog, that partners with Beren and Luthien, holds Sauron when Sauron's like a werewolf by the throat. And in that moment, Sauron shapeshifts into like 4 things back to back, even while he's got his throat held by a dog. So he's got the skills.
All right. Number 3. What's your third guess? Tom Bombadil.
I think it would be. It's not Tom Bombadil.
Ah!
I love Tom Bombadil, but I think the chances of
He would be the most
Tom
exciting
Bombadil,
answer.
He would be. He would
If
be
all of a
so
sudden-
fun.
If all of a sudden the stranger started dancing and singing in episode 3, the viewers would go down dramatically. But you would say, like, there's a core group that's just like, I just bought 3 Prime subscriptions.
Tom Bombadil's in it. I'm sold.
Like, Tom Bombadilio. All right. What's your third guess?
I think it would probably be a original Istari character. So
And what's an
basically
Istari?
original wizard. So for people out there, Istari are wizards. And there is a group of them. So you've got Saruman, Gandalf, Radagast, and there's 2 blue wizards, Alatar and Palando. They all come together are sent by Iluvatar, by the Valar, to help people. But that doesn't happen until Third Age 1000. So this is like thousands of years after what happens in the TV show. So that has me skeptical about an Istari as well, or Gandalf. But yeah, it could be, my third guess is that it's an original wizard that has not been made.
If it's an OG wizard, here's the reason I was thinking of the OG wizard was the ones we know because we have an origin date and everything. If it was someone that had a similar mission earlier, what if it ends in ultimate sacrifice where they don't get to come back?
Ooh. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be like a Tolkien move, right? Like, what is more celebrated than the full gift of the self? And so if this guy, the stranger, who's blessed with some origin he doesn't know because he's forgotten, relearns speech, relations, and is with the Harfoots and all these kinds of things, and then like develops a power, then relearns like his origin story over the 5 seasons and stuff, and it ends with some sacrifice that sets up for the story we pick up right in The Hobbit. Like, he could die a hero that fits in everything that was written that no one knows about, but it makes perfect sense for the Tolkien peeps.
Yeah.
Because
very possible.
Like, first age, there's a lot of info. Third age, there's plenty. Second age, there's a lot of gaps.
Definitely.
And I was like, oh, okay. Now here, that was a long, let's just talk about one question. Second one is smaller. All right. There are a couple of people that asked me about Celebrimbor and the Rings of Power. And we're like, if you knew everything that's about to go down and stuff, what about Celebrimbor in the books? Like, not worried about spoiling, but like worried about watching, knowing what's going on so you could appreciate the storytelling. What should we know about the generation, like from the actual text, about the generation of the Rings of Power, so that we can, watch with the sheet music in hand of sorts to see how the storytellers are playing it out.
Yeah, no, this is great. I love this. So I think it's the second episode where Elrond goes to Eregion and goes to Celebrimbor's place, right?
Yeah, because the first one ends with him with the king being like, oh, like introducing them and being like, he'll tell you about it, blah 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 blah.
That's right. Yeah. So second episode, he goes with Celebrimbor, and Celebrimbor, there's a hammer, and he says the hammer of Feanor. So we talked about Feanor earlier, but for just a brief thing, Feanor was the greatest elven craftsman in the history of Middle-earth, period. The only person who was lived up to the standards, like second best, is Celebrimbor. And Celebrimbor is the grandson of Feanor. And so we don't know where Celebrimbor was born. The text doesn't say if he was born in Valinor or if he was born in Middle-earth. I don't know. Anyway, we won't go down that road, which one's more logical. But he basically learned all his stuff in Gondolin. And so all his craftsmanship, and he hangs out with the dwarves and learns the craft, hangs out with Sauron later to make the Rings of Power. That's why they're so awesome. But yeah, so Celebrimbor is the grandson of Feanor. And part of the reason, so this is, I guess, part of the reason I think that he lived in Valinor was because how can he be the greatest smith without hanging out with his grandpappy? You know what I mean? So.
Oh yeah.
So that's, yeah.
And one of the other things about like thinking that he ultimately constructs the Rings of Power and such in the text itself, how is he ultimately duped? Right? Like if you're watching this going, oh, I know this guy makes this, obviously because it's called fucking like the Rings of Power and Lord of the Rings. Like, you know how this ends. Like, he makes things that cause trouble. Like, what's the cliff notes so that we know how to watch for the storytellers helping us reflect? Because if you've read Lord of the Rings and you've watched Peter Jackson's, there are different dominant elements of the ring. In Peter Jackson's telling, there's this kind of clinging to power energy around the ring that runs through them, and it functions in a very kind of proximity way. It's like, there, right?
Yeah.
And the proximity grab becomes the way it gets told in the visual medium that's there. In the text, the ring functions where, yes, it might get expressed in a proximity grab, but it tells so much of the story, you know, that what really is at stake is the individual's self-understanding. That the ring, but grasping the ring is grasping a version of yourself you'd rather be than yourself.
Yeah.
That you would choose to be someone else. And so you choose this ring. And like, just thinking of the Galadriel, because she's the main character, right? Like, that story, it comes across in the film, but if you, in the text itself, like, she doesn't know if she could set aside the other version of herself.
Yeah.
Right. And that if you were asking me which one is more striking, the alternate timeline, and you could cling and make it happen kind of thing. You could jump timelines. That's so different, right? Than just like, give me all the power in the moment.
Right.
That is like, let me just be number one. But so often in the book, it's let me be the version of myself I couldn't be. All my failures get changed. So like Sam, right? Becomes like, he's like the domination gardener. He's just like, I'm sprouting fruits all over the place. I'm a VeggieTale, you know, and all of it is like the ego expressed through dominance. And, but that's just one example of how like the different versions that go there. But like, knowing the origin story of it, are there particular themes around Celebrimbor's like generation and the way elves, dwarves interact with the rings, that they going into it, you're like, how are they going to deal with this?
Yeah, that it all falls into that theme you're talking about, that alternative self that ends up being a lie that's constructed by the enemy, but also partly created by ourselves. And part of the reason, Sam is able to take off the ring and not be tempted, basically into keeping it, is that he is able to recognize that he can't heal the land of Mordor on his own, even with the ring. He just realizes how absurd that is. And so what people do, in what's wrong, when people are prone to believe that alternative version already, someone like Feanor is, in the beginning, he makes the Silmarils, and he has become the best craftsman of all time. Where he thinks that he has surpassed even the Valar. And obviously it leads to the downfall of all sorts of things. And so Celebrimbor, so he is the son of Kjorfin, which is one of Feanor's sons. And so Kjorfin is one of like the most douchiest out of Feanor's sons. So there's some of Feanor's sons in the first stage that do lots of noble stuff, and then there's a couple others that are just giant dicks, and they're just like Feanor, and even worse. And so Celebrimbor kind of is estranged from his dad, and kind of wants to get rid of, like, he wants to embody the best parts of like his heritage without the negative parts. The only problem is that what Celebrimbor is motivated by is that he wants to, and you kind of get that a little bit in the film when he's asking Elrond, like, he wants to build this big tower, and he wants to, build the biggest tower with the biggest workforce ever, and it's for the benefit of people. But there's also this element that I'm sure it'll play out more, where he wants to be, basically the new Feanor of his time.
Yeah. And I think that the desire for recognition is one of those other themes that runs through Tolkien, right? Like, especially you think of someone who spent so much time in the trenches and is friends with people in the trenches. If you know up close and personal experiences where the version being heard at home is a grandiose story of the war to end all wars, right? World War One.
Yeah.
And then your own experience is one of a series of predominantly tragedies and occasional successes. It leads to that kind of like this desire to tell a story where how you show up when it's not ultimately a part of the big story that you know of as the person that shows up with courage, integrity in the face of failure, or the person that shows up desiring their own fame and prestige and all that kind of stuff. I feel like the way Celebrimbor's character shows up is like the perfect pre-World War One aristocracy character who's like, oh, you see this hammer? The Cimmeril, it even made Morgoth pause. I want to make something better. Like totally. Underneath it is like, I don't know the game I'm playing. I'm unrelated. I don't have a concept of how deep things go or whatever. Like underneath it gets this it's a way of showing us how the powerful don't understand the consequences of their power.
Yeah. It's kind of that naive modernism before pre-World War One, like you said, where it's like, we're good. We're just going to make the best possible society ever. We are good.
We're winning.
Yeah.
Luckily, after a couple World War wars and like failed imperialist expansion of neoliberal capitalism and the impending destruction of the planet, we're like totally on the page of life giving.
Oh yeah, and, I'm right there.
Yeah, I mean, Tolkien was worried that our expansionist logic would pillage the poor in the planet, and we should not succumb to the logic of mechanism. And luckily, we move beyond that. And so this is just like one of those fantasies.
That's effeminate, Trip. That's antithetical to the manly Jesus. Tolkien was a man.
Yeah, he was a man who edits out kissing his friends and crying about it. But anyway, okay, so the last question. Okay, I agree that I was not completely stumped on this, but it was my favorite question to be asked by people in this class. And I'm going to go with Kimberly's phrasing. Kimberly B says, true or false? You completely shit 2 bricks when you went to the mines of Moria. Hashtag, and they call it mines. Hashtag, Gimli was right. Hashtag, how do you get mirrors that powerful? Hashtag, not worried about the science. This is Rings of Power. Hashtag, I halfway forgive Bezos. Kimberly wins for the best question. And I just want to endorse a question and agree that if you are someone that has spent a lot of time in Tolkien, and then you realize that you have these few little bits from just the trailers that you and I have texted about. You hear the theme song of the Dwarves when they release it, and you're like, "Oh, this is so good." But knowing that the Dwarves are like the understated third, right, for so much of the big stories of Middle Earth, where we get the biggest details. That Kimberly said, "Did you shit 2 bricks?" I just said 2. The second time I watched it with Elgin, and we went through that scene, I was like, okay, we're going to rewatch this one more time.
Oh, yeah.
And I did it. So you tell me, like, and they call this mine. Hashtag it. They call this mine. I was like, this is high quality. So if you want me to read your question directly, just throw in a series of hashtags because Kimberly nailed it.
Halfway forgive Jeff Bezos was my favorite. Moria is it may interest towards forgiveness. Yeah, I shit 2 mithril bricks of pure mithril. You know,
is it okay? But is the glowing thing mithril or an arkenstone? That was Elgin and I had a discussion. I was like, it's mithril, obviously. He's like, but do we know if the arkenstone was picked up there or not? And I was like,
the Arkenstone was found in the Lonely Mountain.
I know, but is there one for each mountain or not? Or is it just that only mountain that has it?
I don't think so. I think the Arkenstone where people dig for that particular stone is only related to Erebor, which is the Lonely Mountain. Yeah.
Because Elgin's point was, Daddy Doran looked lusty when he opened up that box. And I was like,
Daddy Doran looking lusty, boy.
I know. I tried to get him to come on. I said, Elgin, could I get you? I was like, I'll give you $50 if you walk down here and tell us your one thought about the first 2 episodes. And he was like, I want to know why Daddy Doran looked all lusty when he opened that box. I was like, yeah, could you just redo that? He's like, I don't even think that's a good idea. I was like, no, it'd be funny. And also, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Like, and you could just do it and leave. And he's like, so you're going to like offer me money to walk down and be like, why did Daddy Doran open a box and get all glowy? And I was like, yeah. Anyway, sorry.
He passed.
Yeah, I know.
Wow.
So if that's not a horrible thing, I want to not ask him what his question is and bribe him next time.
Yeah. I want to hear Elgin say some I want to hear him just say Daddy Doran. He doesn't even have to ask the question. I just want to hear just say Daddy Doran.
Oh, it's Daddy Doran. What's in that box? Step 1. I put some mithril in that box. All right, sorry. Kimberly's question.
No, and it's just talking about the underrepresented world of the dwarves. And the dwarves are power players, man. Before, the Third Age. Erebor in the Iron Hills. There's a whole, like, if you read the appendices, there's a whole separate battle that happens in Return of the King when everyone shows up to the Black Gate. The dwarves are fighting another battle. They're killing some other orcs. So the world
that's important.
Yeah. Yeah, so, Erebor's badass. Go ahead.
No, just as the part. Tell me if this is true. This is my version of it. Like this past year, I listened to the audiobooks because Smeagol read them. Yeah. But it seemed as if you took a step back, right? Like all the battles at the end of the Return of the King, if the dwarves weren't kicking ass in a part off stage, then and maybe the Blue Wizards were doing their business. Who knows? Like the offstage business was enough that it enabled victories that if the attention of Mordor wasn't also placed elsewhere, then the main narrative that you get through the Fellowship doesn't have victory as an option. Is that a fair
Oh,
assumption?
absolutely. It kind of goes into that harmony, of that diversity, that in
Oh,
that
yeah.
harmony, and the dwarves are a part of that. Just
That was the
yeah,
harmony noise.
the harmony noise with the mithril, the shiny mithril.
Shiny mithril. All right, Kimberly's question. Come on, Nick, you're distracting me by making me want
Sorry,
to talk about other things.
I like your asides. I have ADHD, so it's fun.
Well, yeah, the feelings are mutual.
But yeah, so with Moria at this time, which is Khazad-dûm, is huge. It's a power player in the Second Age, and even we don't know, we haven't been introduced. So Celebrimbor. So in the Lord of the Rings, you get the big door right before they go into Moria with the words. So Celebrimbor and a dwarven smith named Narvi built that, and so the dwarves throughout even the Silmarillion are the best smiths ever. There's only a few elves that surpass them, which are Feanor, Celebrimbor. There's another guy called Aridhill, who makes the green elf stone for Aragorn. And like, we don't get a sense. You have to dig to find that. And so to actually see Moria and its height and kind of giving it the attention it deserves, because there's no rings of power without the dwarves. There's no stuff without the dwarves. I need a Durin to come out here. So is there a challenger? And maybe I need to have someone with a beard and break boulders with.
I'm just saying. Your beard being Durin status is high quality comment, and I just want to keep it alive for you. I just want to keep it alive. So so one of the things under Kimberly's question that I think is important, or maybe a part of it that I don't really know, is when it comes to the dwarves and then the way this story is being told, knowing ultimately we get a bunch of goblins and orcs running around with a some fiery beast chasing them, like knowing where it gets, and then obviously Gimli shows up not knowing that's the case, right? So there's some kind of close off among dwarves where they aren't even fully informed of what's going on. Like, how does dwarf society and stuff change such that Gimli shows up with the same confidence like Celebrimbor has, like, we're gonna have salted pork and ale, right? Like when he starts going into that business before the dwarf opens up, which, okay, their like mask that includes the beard is pretty awesome, right? Like, you're like, oh, it's like a death mask from the like Shygon death masks. Anyway,
hell yes,
it was so cool. But what do we know happens to set up showing up at Moria, and another dwarf who should be informed enough to be on show up at Elrond's place doesn't know Moria's changed? Like, how did that whatever dwarf communication and stuff change such that he was uninformed when they showed up?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember all the details with Moria, because at some point, so where we are in the Second Age, they don't encounter the Balrog there, which it's called Durin's Bane. And so we don't encounter it until, I think, oh gosh, it's either the late Second Age or the early Third Age. And so the dwarves it causes dwarves to kind of abandon. So there's an increase of orcs that happen, the Balrogs there, and they kind of bail. It's not until so that it basically gets left to collect dust for a few hundred years. Now, after the events of The Hobbit, that one Balin and I want to say Thorin's dad, not his grandpa, his dad, because his grandpa is killed and kind of goes nuts. I think that him and Balin go back to Moria with some dwarves to try to reestablish Moria as the great thing it was. And they kind of succeed a little bit, but they run into Durnsbane, and then, of course, orcs come back, and that's when you get to the books, and Gimli doesn't know. But there's so much estrangement between the dwarves, communication between dwarf zones, because that's the thing about dwarves. When like elves are trying to be like dominators and like be known, dwarves are prideful in their work, but they keep it insular. And so even with other dwarf communities, they're very I mean, it's like, you know, when you're like, man, that's my first cousin. I haven't talked to you since the family reunion 10 years ago. You know, dwarves, it's like hundreds of years ago.
Well, Durin the Fourth was very upset about 20 years of silence from Elrond.
It's very true.
Okay, that's helpful because I was a bit confused, and Kimberly's question was great. All right, so last thing, if the creators had read your mind of what you want to happen in episode 3, what is it? What is going to happen in episode 3?
Oh man, I have been thinking specifically with Numenor, and then the dude Halbrand who saves Galadriel. I've heard people say that Halbrand is like a Southlander, which is where Bronwyn's from. But I really want him to be so Rovanion is an area that's where Rohan. That's the people from there become the Rohirrim. And I just really want to see, you know, because we've got the little necklace he's wearing that he's a Numenor, Galadriel's there, and we just are like on full front. We're headed towards the Alliance. They're hanging out, doing their thing. So eventually, anyway, I just want to know more about Numenor, know more about Halbrand.
All right. The thing I'd be like totally into is figuring out a way that in the South, what's our like, you know, movie only elf? With the green
Morondir.
Morondir. I would love a way that he doesn't die. One.
Yes.
And that the elves that have been in that place as long as him, because of his testimony of the arrival of the orcs, that they rally against the king and don't all go back. That these elves that realized that the king's like PR isn't wonderful, it's not accurate, that they then rally against, and they become some kind of like they practice elfin solidarity, because you saw the other people in the South Watch Tower being like, no, we're here because these people are just like the people 1,000 years ago, even though it's been multiple generations of humans.
Yeah.
They are that horrible. They're just like down for the Mordor, a hype machine. You know, they're like ready to be like, Morgoth, give me some orders. Like they're that horrible. And you get that like tension between the two elves. I'd love for it to be a situation where those elves turn, and it's the friendship there at ground zero between elves and men that ultimately forge the fellowship that the 5 seasons will do. That would be, and I don't know if it happens the next episode or not, but I like, because, and here's the reason why, like, knowing you picking this up. I mean, obviously the elf and human friendship thing is a big deal. We already have these vibes between the stranger and the Harfoots. We already have a vibes going on, and the like multiple other storylines, but there you only have this romance thing, and then people are like, oh, it's gonna be a romance, blah 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 blah. Well, what if that connection sets up the first place you get you get the reestablishment of an alliance.
Yeah,
Uh,
dude. And
the
you're not
alliance comes out of judgment. That'd be high quality Tolkien material. You
High
break
quality.
down your bigotry because you ally against a real threat.
Well, and they're talking. I mean, they're hinting at it, right? Like Durin's dad is totally like elves. Elrond's an elf. Watch out.
yeah.
And Arondir, you're not, man. You're like on there. So the Sylvan elves, which are elves, which people are speculating that Arondir is one of those. They're the people that stayed near Lorien. They didn't go to Valinor, and
That's
they're
like, is that like the Legolas style?
exactly, yeah,
Yeah.
totally. And
So he
those
can
dudes,
surf and shoot at the same time.
exactly, which Arondir is probably going to hit us with some high quality, acrobatics and arrow catching and things. But they're kind of leaderless. They're kind of people who kind of just do their own thing. So for them to kind of be like, we're going to break orders and do our own thing is totally in character for the Sylvan elves.
Mm-hmm. Well, all right. I've had so much fun hanging out with you, Nick and
Dude,
Kevin.
same.
I can't believe that I get to be a parent of a teenage boy while we have a weekly series of Tolkien stuff that doesn't suck after watching the first 2 episodes.
Yes, dude.
It is so thrilling. I hope this is so good. Like if you ask me like what happens after these 5 seasons, what if, given they already have the rights and all this kind of thing, they take 5 seasons to tell Fellowship of the Rings. So we get 6 episodes with Tom Bombadil.
I was if it's been high quality so far. Like
yeah,
you
that's
said,
what I'm talking about.
Lord of the Rings could totally be a series.
Yeah.
Ugh.
And then the extended editions, which I watch every Advent, anticipating the arrival of the God-Man. But like I'm just saying, if it is this quality and the people that care this much about it, then we're like, let me tell the story that we actually have in the text. I would love it. And I would just replay. This is for Amazon that might be listening. Replay every episode like 10 times just so that it doesn't get canceled before Faramir, the real Faramir, comes out. And then the whole world, 25 million people that watch this junk, gets to know the Faramir like is almost as cool as Sam. Faramir is one of the greatest characters. He got shafted.
He did
in the movies, and then everyone else gets to understand Tom Bombadil. And you know what? The people who watch the movies, they don't get to know multiple Ents. We get to know multiple Ents. Also, what was the scene I rewatched the most times? Someone sent that question. It was a little baby Entling. I was like, how did Groot get to co-star? He's now in the Lord of the Rings franchise in the MCU. What's up with that? What's up with that? The little Ent wife and the little baby Entling. I was just like, oh.
I'm ready for some baby Ents.
You got to admit, like, if it's some season in this, there's like save the baby thing, and it's a little Entling, people will respond to an Entling like they respond to killing a puppy.
Oh my god!
Right? Like
100%.
if a hero saves an Entling, they then have plot armor for the rest of the show.
And if they try to do like, because Merry and Pippin's relationship with Treebeard is just iconic, you know?
Yeah.
And if they do the same thing with the Harfoots, where it's like little baby Enting hanging out with little Poppy, and then they're like, oh no, orcs are coming to chop down the little Enting.
Oh no, no basket.
No.
Yeah. Oh, all right. I'm gonna go to bed, but Nick, I love hanging out with you. I can't believe
dude.
We got to hang out with Kevin Max.
That was so cool.
That was fun. And he did basically like try to talk us into talking about Dune next time. There's new Dune material. So this has been a blast. All of you that are listening, remember, if you would like to access all of the Super Tolkien Nerds drop lectures and access all our previous conversations, go to tokenheadpod.com. You sign up, you can donate anything, including $0. Get access. And if you check the post where this comes out, you'll see links to all the stuff Kevin's up to, including the Kickstarter, where if you donate anything, you get the fantasy album, including, what we played earlier from the Hobbit cartoon movie, and plenty of other stuff. But also, if he gets the full thing, whatever, how there are like levels of Kickstarter. One level is that he does an album of punk covers of DC Talk songs.
I need
and
that.
Our text exchange about how you would modify DC Talk songs into punk versions is high. So the early DC Talk, the song, the album, the first album, has a song called Heaven Bound. Now, if you were a hippie, socialist, universalist style member of DC Talk like Kevin, I said the punk version should be heaven now, right? Like advocating an insurrection in the material order on behalf of God's loving divine justice. Anticipating a world where the Acts 2 vision of all things held in common is being held in common by the people of God in the presence for the benefit of the poor and the planet. So I'm not sure that one is as like catchy as the alternative version of I Don't Want It, but directed towards purity culture. Like, I don't want purity culture. I feel like that's a high quality move.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's taking any of my advice. And personally, if judging on our comparative success, I wouldn't take my advice,
I mean, he did get to audition for Frodo,
Yeah, I am not auditioned for Frodo. Except I do have a unique voice for him when reading The Lord of the Rings to my children. So that's as far as I got.
That's high quality dad stuff right there.
Yeah, it has this innocence with a sense of like uncomfortability about it in the beginning. Give me a line. I'll say it in my Frodo voice.
Oh, okay. Do your favorite one about my Sam, my story, my Sam.
No, that's later in it. You're
talking about early.
Yeah.
Maybe ask about the ring, like why, or I wish the ring never came to me.
I wish the ring never came to me. Yeah.
Oh, I liked it.
He's always got this like soft innocence about it, but then by the time it gets to Sam, the switch I do in reading is that the hard part of the sentence comes earlier.
Nice.
Where then he says, I couldn't tell this story without my Sam. Right. So it's like you're hangry and you're worn down by the ring. And even despite that, you're trying to like be good. But it always because to be Frodo at that point, the way of the ring, like he has to be deliberate about the first part. Yeah. Early, it's and then later it's like
yeah, he's a little hardened too by his experience.
Yeah. And I'll just say, if you have only watched the movies, the first time you read it through, it's really hard to do a good Aragorn voice because they're just so different.
Yeah.
So there's life lessons about reading Lord of the Rings every year to your children. And I have voices for all the characters. I also have them for most of the members of the Avengers. So and I don't do voices for characters in Scripture. That I just read it and let them pick it up. So
there's just too many characters in Scripture, like even more than Lord of the Rings,
Yeah, and unlike Scripture, I don't know the other languages.
Fair.
I was like, I can manage Greek and Hebrew. I cannot. I can't do Elvish. So, alrighty, that was fun.